What's going on, guys? Welcome to another segment of Bro History. We are going to be talking about the Gaza Peace Plan that's been proposed.
Yep.
There has been actually, Danny, can you fill us in? Because you've been following this closer than I am.
Yep. And obviously, just a quick reminder, it is October 1st, late in the evening, Eastern Standard Time. So what we're talking about today might completely change at any moment. Just give you some background context into the time period that we're doing this. Caught it pretty early. So, trying to learn about everything that we have. So what I wanted to do was kind of take a look at this 20-point peace plan that Trump recently announced. And honestly, I kind of want to read through it together because while I've read a lot of like analysis about it and seen some videos and stuff like that, I actually haven't read through it. So I'm curious to see how that works out and what our, opinions are on, how the peace plan is formed, whether we think it's like gonna work, and just kind of like what are the ancillary, things that might arise based on some of the 20 points. Because I've been hearing some shit and I'd like to read it myself. So that's the hopeful goal. But quick background. So starting with the 20-point Gaza Peace Plan unveiled. This was announced on September 29th at the White House with Benjamin Netanyahu in tow. And some of the headline elements that you can get out of it were that the hostages would be released within 72 hours, that there would evidently be a massive aid surge and some reconstruction efforts, that there would be a transitional governance board that would be chaired by none other than Trump, that there would be the obvious prisoner exchanges and some conditional amnesty for Hamas members, which is really interesting. And I think probably the biggest ones were points on the list for me were just the promise of no forced displacements, right to return for those who decide to leave, and the biggest one probably is a pathway to self-determination. But the devil's always in the details for this, so I'd like to read through exactly what all those points are. And then finally, I just wanted to also kind of talk a little bit about how this is being received, and also kind of a discrepancy that I noticed in Netanyahu's English versus Hebrew messaging, where it's pretty supportive in English, but domestically and in Hebrew, kind of a little counterintuitive to what's going on. And maybe talk a little bit about some arguments for and against, this peace plan. But that's the background context. Henry, what do you think? Do you have any questions before we get started?
Yeah, there's been so much talk about what they're going to do with Gaza after the war ends, or I don't know.
The Riviera Gaza?
The war is really not the correct way to describe this. The slaughter would be a better, more appropriate.
Yeah.
So after this ends, there's been a lot of talk, and a lot of it's been, most of it doesn't seem to make too much sense from, like you said, making Gaza the Riviera of the Middle East, which
I think that one might be off the table at this point, but at least the way that it was initially ideated. But let's maybe not stray too much from the source material on this one. Let's read through each of these points. Stop me whenever you feel like you have something to say. I'll probably stop at natural points, just to ask questions and, think about it. But full disclosure, for those who don't like this news media outlet, I'm getting this from Al Jazeera because they're the only ones that I could find right now that actually have the full 20 points written as they are. And
I had the Times of Israel up with the same 20 points.
I didn't see that one yet. I had pulled this maybe 3 hours ago or something like that, so I hadn't seen that yet.
So all right. We'll see.
Either way,
shouldn't be discrepancy.
No. All right. So first point. Gaza will. Can you see the screen too? Yeah. Okay. Good.
I'm looking at.
You're looking at
my
a
article,
separate screen. Got it. So first point is Gaza will be de-radicalized, terror-free zone that does not pose a threat to its neighbors. Interested in seeing how they figure that one out. But
yeah, I guess the question is what's the process of de-radicalization mean? Really, what is that? How does that work?
Right. I mean, Russia invaded Ukraine. One of the many reasons that they state is to de-radicalize, anti-Nazify or whatever they said, and that's a fucking bloody war. So, yeah, I wonder what de-radicalization means here. And,
just it's interesting that you bring that up because when that was one of the many points that Putin brought up
Mhm.
prior to the invasion, that they had a denazification,
Right.
which in their terms means they don't. So when they say the word Nazi in Russia, they mean something very different than what we say in America when we're like,
Mhm.
"Oh, you're being a Nazi," which is just like a term for calling someone who might be a bigot or racist here.
Right.
In Russia, that means like the enemy or the other. So
Mm.
when they say denazification, they mean to remove the enemy in the Ukrainian government.
Okay. Well,
So
I'd argue that Israel basically labels all of the Palestinians in that area as terrorists. So a terror-free zone would be a Palestinian-free zone.
yeah, that's the natural conclusion, right? That would be the way to eliminate terrorism because, man, I heard Macron say at the UN, I think I read this correctly. Maybe I'm incorrect, but I thought I read that he said that there's an equal amount of Hamas now than there was before October 7th. I find that believable. The
Plausible.
fact that there's more people, more young men specifically, who joined Hamas, whether that be for revenge or whether that be for
Practicality. I mean,
yeah,
what other jobs are there right now in Gaza?
yeah.
How else do you get food in Gaza?
So the question is it going to be even possible to eliminate radical element from Gaza? I don't
I
know.
mean, this is super vague. This is super
It's
vague. Well, on the face of it, like I'm like, yeah, cool. Yeah, let's make that, terror-free. Let's de-radicalize it. I think that's not terrible, but the specifics of like how and what and when and why, I don't know. Let's move on though, because there's so many more like this that I think we'll get stuck on. Gaza will be redeveloped for the benefit of the people of Gaza who have suffered more than enough. Okay?
okay.
Cool.
So I'm reading Gaza will be redeveloped for the benefit of its people.
Interesting. Benefit of its people. If your version is the correct one or the word for word one, then its people is vague enough to imply things. But if they say specifically the people of Gaza, that I would assume means the benefit of the Palestinians of Gaza. In any case, they definitely need to redevelop it one way or another because it's an absolute fucking, rubble. There's nothing left of it. Moving along, if both sides agree to this proposal, the war will immediately end. Israeli forces will withdraw to the agreed upon line to prepare for a hostage release. During this time, all military operations, including aerial and artillery bombardment, will be suspended, and battle lines will remain frozen until conditions are met for the complete staged withdrawal. All right. I mean, a couple of particulars in there that I would want to know more specifically, like what is the agreed upon line? How long and what are the stages of the staged withdrawal? What does that look like? Who is the judge of all of this? Like, do we have a third party or international observers that, say, yes, indeed, all the military operations have ceased and aerial and artillery bombardment has ceased and has been suspended and that the battle lines haven't moved? There's things that I want to know more about, but I don't disagree with this. This makes sense. If they both agree, go ahead. Stop the war right now. Within 72 hours of Israel publicly accepting this agreement, all hostages alive and deceased will be returned. Cool. I agree with that. To the extent that it is like physically possible to move those people in 72 hours, I'm sure it should be, right? Then yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
I don't know. I guess
I don't know where they are or how, I don't know what the logistics of that looks like, but
Gaza's not a big place. I'm sure if they had them, they can get them to Israel pretty quickly. But it's like, how many hostages are alive?
I don't know. I think they have like 48 total, but like the numbers of like how many of them are alive and how many of them are dead change every day. So
Yeah.
I think it's like a half and half right now,
I know they returned that American kid a
Did
couple
they?
of months ago, but I don't.
I'm in
presuming
favor
I'm
of this one.
presuming
This one's fine.
there's more alive.
Yeah. This one's fine with me. This is great. Perfect. Once all hostages are released, Israel will release 250 life sentence prisoners, plus 1,700 Gazans who were detained after October 7th, including all women and children detained in that context. I mean, the fact that they've detained women and children in the first place and still hold them is wild, but I digress. For every Israeli hostage whose remains are released, Israel released the remains of 15 deceased Gazans. Okay, interesting. So dead people is a 1-to-15 ratio. I mean, I like this. This makes sense to me. It's fine. I don't know anyone who would protest that. Once all hostages are returned, Hamas members who commit to a peaceful coexistence and to decommission their weapons will be given amnesty. This is a big one. Members of Hamas who wish to leave Gaza will be provided safe passage to receiving countries. Is that around the same as the one that you have? Is there any discrepancies in the wording there?
So once the hostages return, yeah, mine is just an abridged version. You have the full one.
Okay. So once the hostages are returned, Hamas, if a Hamas member says, I commit to peaceful coexistence with Israel and I will decommission my weapons, they get amnesty. So that's very interesting. I don't know that that's politically expedient for Israel right now, or at least for the far right. I don't know that would be allowed.
No, it wouldn't.
I already think that's a non-start on the Israeli side right there.
They would not let them go because who would accept them too? So you're going to take someone from Hamas.
I'm sure somebody would accept them, but that's not the point. It's not the leaving part. It's the amnesty part, right?
No, but I'm saying that, all right, so you're Hamas, you're in Hamas. What country is going to take you? Where are you going to go? Qatar?
I guess it depends on how we define Hamas, right? Because Hamas is technically also all of the civil servants who just, do civil servant shit. Like, I'm the guy that picks up the trash. That's technically like a civil servant of Hamas. That's technically Hamas, right? Not all Hamas is a political entity, right? Hamas isn't just the armed militant group. That's actually a small subsection of the Hamas, right? Hamas is an entire political entity. It would be like if the Republican Party had a militia, right? And took over something and did an October 7th, right? Every civil servant, every Republican civil servant would be classified as Republican. So, down to the garbage man, straight up to, the leadership of Hamas, they're all Hamas. And that includes, obviously, the armed militants, but it's not exclusive to the armed militants either. This is how I'm reading it. I think that this is a little bit vague on purpose, but this is how I read it. The fact that they're saying to decommission their weapons gives me the indication that maybe we're referring strictly to the warfighters, the Hamas warfighters, that could get, people that are in the armed militia groups. But I don't see this flying in Israel on the far right. I don't see them saying, yeah, we'll give armed militants who decided to, decommission their weapons and agree to peaceful coexistence. I don't think they're going to, no, they're not going to be okay with amnesty. They're not going to be okay with that.
No, I don't think, I agree. That would most likely be a non-starter.
Yeah.
Let's go on to the next one.
All right.
Or if you...
Last point, it says members of Hamas who wish to leave Gaza will be provided safe passage. So it's also saying that some of them could stay. So can you imagine a Hamas member, militant, who just said, okay, we're going to, decommission our weapons and I'll agree to peacefully coexist with Israel and I get amnesty and I'm staying in Gaza. You think that's going to fly? Also, do we actually believe that they're going to get amnesty?
No.
Would Hamas believe that they would get amnesty? I don't think that they would trust the Israelis to let them off with a pass. I don't think that there's enough trust on both sides for this to work. So I already think that's a non-start. But let's continue. Upon acceptance of this agreement, full aid will immediately be sent into the Gaza Strip. At a minimum, aid quantities would be consistent with what was included in the January 19th, 2025 agreement regarding humanitarian aid, including the rehabilitation of infrastructure, water, electric, sewage, rehabilitation of hospitals and bakeries, and entry of necessary equipment to remove rubble and open roads. Okay, I mean, like, that's great, but also we're basically saying only when we accept this agreement will full aid be sent to Gaza. So we're like not okay with giving Gaza any aid until there's an agreement, which I think is probably like a war crime, the fact that they're not allowing aid in. I mean, I think this part of this 20-point plan, this point is proving that not enough aid is getting in, right?
They're saying it out loud. Yeah, we'll give you
saying
all
full aid.
The full
Right.
aid.
Right. So that means they're not giving the full aid right now. So like, what is, anyway, that's something else. I think this is fine, but just wanted to point that out. All right, next point. Entry of distribution and aid in the Gaza Strip will proceed without interference from the two parties through the United Nations and its agency and the Red Crescent, in addition to other international institutions not associated in any manner with either party. Opening the Rafah crossing in both directions will be subject to the same mechanism implemented under the January 19th, 2025 agreement. Okay, I should probably read this January 19th, 2025 agreement because I'm sure there's specific or extra details in there that would be relevant for this. But so far, it's just saying, hey, if we open this up, if you guys agree, we'll open up the aid distribution, we'll open up Rafah, and all the aid distribution will happen under the United Nations and Red Crescent and other third parties that aren't, directly aligned with Israel or Hamas. So that's interesting. All right, next, Gaza will. This is a big one, but an important one. Gaza will be governed under the temporary transitional governance of a technocratic, apolitical Palestinian committee responsible for delivering the day-to-day running of public services and municipality for the people in Gaza. Okay, that's wild, right? So they're basically saying, this is your new government. This is your transitional government. It's a technocratic, apolitical Palestinian committee. That's what they're trying to set up on day one of this thing. And then it says, this committee will be made up of qualified Palestinians and international experts with oversight and supervision by a new international transitional body, the, quote, Board of Peace, which will be headed and chaired by President Donald J. Trump, with other members and heads of state to be announced, including former Prime Minister Tony Blair. Okay, I got to get your reaction to this. They're making an oversight board for their government, an unelected, un-Palestinian oversight board. That's not sovereignty. That's a takeover there.
Yeah, it's like basically it's like Kosovo.
No, I'll tell you what it's more like. It's more like Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico has an unelected, un-Puerto Rican board of representatives that has, for the last several years, basically taken over all of the Puerto Ricans' budgetary stuff. So they are the reason for major austerity cuts, and they aren't Puerto Rican.
No,
and they weren't elected.
Kosovo has a UN mandate.
Does it?
Yeah.
So they don't get to run their own shit? It's just UN?
No.
Yeah, I don't like that.
Run.
But, whatever. It's not even my opinion. Like, it doesn't matter what I think. It's what would the Palestinians agree to, or what would Israel think, of this Board of Peace? I'm sure they're probably going to have, Israelis on the Board of Peace, or Israel-aligned people on the Board of Peace. There's no way that that wouldn't be the case.
So they're not going to have Finkelstein on it. They're going to have Jared Kushner.
Yeah, but that's like a conflict of interest.
They're going to have the people who would be on this board are going to be Zionist. They're not going to, if they take one token person who may give minor criticism to Israel, maybe they would do that, but not going to put people on this board that have any of hostility towards Israel. It will be,
or empathy for Palestine, for that matter.
Or it'll be handpicked. Maybe you could see someone like John McCain's wife. Was it Linda McCain? John McCain's wife.
What qualifications does John McCain's wife, or what business does John McCain's wife have being part of an unelected Board of Peace that oversees a quote, technocratic, apolitical Palestinian committee responsible for the day-to-day running of public services in Palestine? I don't understand that.
Cindy,
What business does?
Cindy McCain is like a humanitarian, and she's a director of the World Food Program. She absolutely does. So John McCain was a hardcore Zionist his entire career.
Mhm.
Cindy McCain is actually, she's involved in like the aid distribution there, and she's been surprisingly pretty critical or truthful about the situation there. You could see someone like that being put on the board. Like she would, if you're talking about people who are qualified, and I'm not trying to honor the legacy of the McCains right here, but she's not just like some random spouse of a famous politician. Like she runs a humanitarian organization.
All right. Well,
So naturally, you would put
I stand corrected about Cindy McCain. However, my larger point still stands. What business does maybe I'm phrasing this wrong. Imagine I randomly appointed Cindy McCain to oversee your life. I mean, you might not care so much, right? But in the context of like Palestinians, would they care? Some random person from across the fucking planet. They don't know who this is. They don't. It's not one of theirs.
I'm not trying to defend this peace plan. I'm not trying to. These points are realistic, but just say if you were just put yourself in Trump's shoes, and let's say this is like an honest attempt, just give it some charity. That this is maybe they think this is a good enough idea to get something.
Okay.
Obviously, that would include like picking who runs the state. Like you are in control of who is actually going to run the civil services in the state. Like it needs to be someone who's going to cooperate with your agenda.
And that's why
I would go far to say be handpicked by people who are loyal to the ideas. Like if I
hear you, but that's what makes it fundamentally flawed, in my opinion.
There's
always going to be some kind of conflict of interest that's happening here.
It is flawed, and it's not right. It's not like morally right or justifiable, but it's just the reality of the situation. Like they're not going to be like, okay, guys, we understand you made a mistake electing Hamas, but we're going to give you another chance to do another election. And this election will not have any influence from us. You guys can handpick whoever you want to distribute aid. Do you think that they would give them that type of control?
Well, let's figure out what exactly this body is. Let's read about what they're saying this body is going to do, because I think that's an important piece of context, right? So this body will set the framework, and I'm reading directly now again. This body will set the framework and handle the funding for the redevelopment of Gaza until such time as the Palestinian Authority has completed its reform program as outlined in various proposals, including President Trump's peace plan in 2020 and the Saudi-French proposal, and can securely and effectively take back control of Gaza. That was a long, fun fucking sentence. Okay, let's break this out. It's saying they're going to take control of the funding and redevelopment of Gaza until the PA, the Palestinian Authority, completes this set of reform programs, which we'll get into in a second because I think that's troubling in its own right. But they're going to handle the funding for the redevelopment of Gaza. So it's not like they're, governing Palestine, right? They're not governing Gaza. They're just doing all the funding. This is exactly like the unelected board in Puerto Rico, the junta, as it's called here. It is a financial oversight board. And so the people that you put on this financial oversight board matters now, because if you put a Trump on there, then I can imagine that a fucking Trump hotel gets built somewhere in Gaza. You know what I mean? Like, especially if it's a Kushner, right? Because they've already got, several conflicts of interest in the Middle East, with real estate deals. It matters.
That's probably what Trump thinks the solution is. In his mind, he probably thinks that, hey, what really needs to be there, and because he's not a deep thinker, he does not like deeply pondering the origins of the war or the nature of resistance. Like he's just, if we had motels there, maybe it would stop. Yeah, it's just Trump hotel. And like that to him, that hotel is like this monument to civilization, his civilization.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're willing to, I'm not saying he didn't propose this, but like you could see that as, I did it. I made peace. There's a Trump hotel there. So I guess in their mind, development like that in general would be the direction they want to go with. And then these people can convert into westernized framework where they're overwhelmingly. But again, that's like not the direction of where most of the world is going. Most of the world is becoming very anti-Israel, but
Right.
it's,
I think this,
you know,
the
you
second
gotta,
the second half of this though is kind of important too, Henry. Though when you think about it, it's saying that okay, to your earlier point, we're not saying hey, you get to try again and elect whoever you want. You get a mulligan on electing Hamas, but it's like the other option, the Palestinian Authority, has to reform. I'm not a huge fan of the Palestinian Authority myself. I think they're wildly corrupt as well. But it's like it's setting all of these prerequisites for self-governance and self-determination that I think are unreasonable. Because it's already precluding that, like, okay, you definitely can't have Hamas. You can't have the Palestinian Authority because they have to do all these reform programs as outlined in several different, proposals. And, we'll have this board that'll oversee you indefinitely until such time that the Palestinian Authority has completed all of these reform programs, which could ostensibly be never, right? They could move the goalposts on what this reform program means. I don't really, this is worth a deep dive, but that's how I'm reading it.
that's possible, probably likely. It's, the Palestinian Authority is very corrupt. It's essentially just a corrupt Arab government.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't imagine them effectively eventually taking control of Gaza.
Meeting the
But
standards, meeting whatever standards are being put in front of them in order to take over. Yeah. And then to round this out, this body will call on the best international standards to create modern and efficient governance that serves the people of Gaza and is conducive to attracting investment. I don't know. I just don't believe that. But whatever. That was a big one.
invest in, if you're an investor, do you think that's a good investment opportunity to invest in Gaza? Hey, like I have this great opportunity. Let's invest in the Gaza Strip. Oh yeah,
that's like
that
that's
place
like
that
a
was just
vulture, like
leveled?
vulture capitalists might invest in it, but not because they think it's going to win, but because they want to just extract all of the possible resources and whatever wealth is left and remains there, and like lease it
But like
out to the highest bidder.
what resources are there? Like when they talk about resources
on the
in
coast,
Gaza,
it
they're talking
is
about
on the coast. It isn't in the
just like
Mediterranean,
land.
So
Yeah, but the
yeah,
value is the land itself. It's not like there's some fucking there's oil under there, or there's these natural resources. They're literally just the
real
land
estate
is what is valuable.
real estate is not to be underestimated. Like that is probably the safest bets that you can make. Like if you're going to invest in something, invest in real estate, because that traditionally is way less volatile than every other investment that you can possibly make. Now the question is how much less volatile is investing in real estate in fucking Gaza? Like that's it kind of throws out all the standard projections about like investing in real estate out the window, because at any moment
what if there anything could pop off? So let's just say 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road, there is, let's say some type of peace is created, and
right, we do this plan,
and there's a million Palestinians that are left in Gaza after the war. That very well, that could be, there were 2 million before the war. Maybe there'll be 1 million left.
Right.
It's still enough people, large enough male population that, because think about all the kids who are like seeing their parents get destroyed.
They all grow up.
Are they're going to grow up, and how are you going to? It's not, you're talking about de-radicalization, but it's like
I want you to hold
it's a lot
that
deeper
thought.
than.
I want you to hold that thought specifically because I know that there's a point in this 20-point plan that relates to exactly what you're about to ask.
Okay,
so pin that. So next one, a Trump economic development plan to rebuild and energize Gaza will be created by convening a panel of experts who have helped birth some of the thriving modern miracle cities in the Middle East. Okay, so what, like Saudis, right? Like many thoughtful investment proposals and exciting development ideas have been crafted by well-meaning international groups and will be considered to synthesize the security and governance frameworks to attract and facilitate these investments that will create jobs, opportunity, and hope for future Gaza. So we've got, what I'm reading here is like potentially Saudis, Emiratis, people like that, Qataris, they're all going to basically invest in this land to redevelop it because, it's probably going to come on the super cheap. And if this gets, seriously backed by, the United States and the world at writ large, like maybe that kind of like guarantees or becomes the guarantor of this particular investment. I could see that as a thing.
Arabs, it's like one of those things that I don't know. Does the Arab world even? I guess some parts of the Arab world do value this, but it's like this carrot that we hold where it's like, hey, don't you want to be like the UAE? Don't you want to be like Saudi Arabia?
Yeah.
The smart Arabs who
Right.
got in line and now are rich. Look at these modern cities. They're making a data center city, a city who's just data centers. They're doing something like that in Saudi Arabia where they're, constructing 1 million data centers. The difference is that cities, like, they had been wealthy for 70 years, since like the 50s. So they've been wealthy, and they weren't built over war zones. How can you convert this city into a viable, like, modern city,
I don't know, by
technological city?
by the estimates that I've seen, first of all, just the rubble removal itself is going to take for fucking ever and cost so much money. Second of all, a lot of like issues are like environmental impacts are happening because of the destruction in Gaza, right? Like groundwater is probably completely poison at this point, and that's fucking water, So like they'd have to build like crazy ass desalinization plants, which is not impossible. It's just very costly, right? And then they have to get the energy there to produce it. So it's like we're talking about massive, massive investment in reconstruction. I'm wondering who's footing the bill, and even more than who's footing the bill, how do they stand to benefit, right? Because no one's just giving cash at, just for altruistic reasons. That's not real. That's not realist, So
I'd love to
something to think
see
about.
something on. I would love to read more about like the reconstruction of the major cities that were destroyed during World
Well,
War
like
II.
Dresden, I was in Dresden in 2006. And when I went on a tour of Dresden in 2006, one of the big highlights of the tour was like, oh, we just finished rebuilding this fucking cathedral that was firebombed to shit. In 2006, they were like very proud about it because they did this thing where they found all the rubble that they could from it to like use the original, pieces and put them back like Legos. And then they, obviously had to fill in the gaps with a bunch of new rubble. And you can actually see the building. It's actually really cool. When you look at it, it looks like, kind of spotted because you can see which of the bricks are new and which of them are old. But that was 2006 that they just finished. And we're talking about Germany.
Yeah, it's going to take a while. But I'm interested to read more about, okay, a city like Tokyo, a city like Dresden, a city like Hiroshima and Nagasaki, a city like, what's the Sevastopol that was like completely destroyed during the war? Like these cities that were like annihilated during the Second World War, like basically removed from the map. How did that rebuilding, like what was that rebuilding process like? What were the procedures to get rid of all the poison and all that appears when concrete breaks and plastics burn and all that shit? Like, what does that consist of? Like, how do you remove all the bombs and like sweep the area to make sure that you're not going to step on something that explodes you?
Well, for some context, like Gaza is about the same size as Las Vegas. I don't know if you have a sense for how big Las Vegas is, but imagine just completely redoing all of Las Vegas, all of it. It's not a small undertaking, is what I'm trying to get to. So it'll be a while.
It's possible, but it's just
It requires a very high amount of investment. And I'm not saying that this is impossible or that it shouldn't happen. It definitely should, right? I'm just curious, like power structures and money is important when we think about some of these things. And like somebody's going to have to front the bill for it. It ain't going to be the Palestinians because they don't have any money in the first place. It's probably not going to be the Israelis because I just don't see it politically expedient for the Israelis to decimate all of Palestine, all of Gaza, to only turn around and foot the bill to redevelop it, unless it's going to be theirs and they get to annex it and keep it, right? which isn't happening according to this plan. So who else is going to pay for it? Is it going to be us? Is it going to be the United States taxpayer? Good luck. We're already like $40 trillion in debt, right? We can't even fund our own government. That shit got shut down. So who's that leave?
I could see us doing that, and that would be like a blink compared to the other things that we pay for.
Oh, I agree, dude. I agree. And I think it would be more worthwhile from a moral perspective. However, it's not so easy to appropriate because it's not a small amount of money. It's not like pocket change. The amount of money we're talking about in the hundreds of billions of dollars to redevelop Gaza. Hundreds of billions. I just don't see us doing that.
It would be some international coalition, or it would be like a combination of the United States, the Gulf countries, and the UK. It would be like an international effort.
And all of them would have, yeah, I agree. And all of them would be like, okay, and what do I get in return? Because realistically, why would they put up money for no reason? And so doesn't that put into perspective the financial board that they're looking to, put in place that, has all of the control about how those funds are distributed? Are we particularly good at, we've had people on the show that talk about how, American money that's set up to, who were we talking to? I think we might have been talking to Matt Ho about this, how, we sent all this money to give to these communities and these warlords and shit like that. And, they just end up spending it on the side. And it's so easy for us to let this money go to waste, and not actually get anything done, not actually get a single road built, not a single bridge built. We have a bad track record with this.
It would probably be easier. Get right here. It would be a lot easier to control what's going on in Gaza because it's just one city. So it's not like Iraq when you're dealing with an entire country, and then you're literally like taking it's imperial oversight on the country itself. Like we're essentially like putting our own technocrats there to run it and excluding the Palestinians from any type of decision making. And what I'm saying,
make a good point, but I think you're giving a little too much credit to us. We literally have giving us too much credit. Track record.
But one of the issues with Iraq, where these that we worked with in Iraq were just like essentially just, hey, are you seriously giving me this money? Okay, I'm gonna go take this and not put this in infrastructure. I think that Iraq is a different situation because we were dealing with a political faction that we were allied with and we had to depend on for reconstruction. In Gaza, we're essentially excluding them from decision making entirely. And so I guess you're taking care of that problem because it's not like we're going to give the Palestinian Authority to run things. Like they would obviously just fucking, God knows what they would do with that money.
I wouldn't trust the Palestinian Authority with that money either, just to be very clear.
No, I guess they're super corrupt.
I don't think that we have the best track record even, doing infrastructure projects on our own. I think in that case, I would probably trust the Saudis more than I would the United States, for this infrastructure.
I would probably trust them to do it more than they would probably do the best job. But it's like there's also the political question. There's all these political questions that come up where it's, the Israelis don't want these Gulf countries to have too much influence in Gaza. It's the whole thing. For the most part, it seems an attempt to say, hey, we tried, but it failed, and it didn't really.
I honestly think that's the whole point of this entire exercise is that we tried, but it failed. Let's move on. A special economic zone will be established with preferred tariff and access rates to be negotiated with participating countries. Okay, cool. Whatever. They get a little break on tariffs, whatever. No one will be forced to leave Gaza. That's interesting. And those who wish to leave will be free to do so and free to return. So we're actually baking in right to return. That is huge because for 750,000 Palestinians in the diaspora, more now because they've had children and shit, they're not allowed to return. But somehow we're baking into this peace plan that those who wish to leave get to come back. But they're saying we will encourage people to stay. and offer them the opportunity to build a better Gaza. So they're saying, hey, you should stick around, help us rebuild, probably use them as like cheap labor force, which, I mean, for the Gazans, that might be actually a win-win situation. But
I
this
mean,
is
for the Gazans, anything that would stop the horror of what they're going through right now would be a win situation. But
I find this very interesting, though.
Sometimes I think about it, and I'm obviously very sympathetic to the Palestinians, and I'm just like, hey, man, I wish these people can just like, we can get these people away from these maniacs. Just like anything to do to evacuate these people from this kind of
this plan has an opportunity for that. This
and
plan has an opportunity for that. So,
and I don't know where you put them. Obviously, you can't put them all in one country. So, and then it's like, where do you put them? You got to try to think through.
Not really where do you put them, but for those who leave, where are the possible places that they can go? Because like countries all over the world would have to start saying like, here's our policy on like Gazans who left Gaza, right? And, you know, a lot of these countries who just recognize Palestine as a state, as a nation state in the UN, is going to have to pony up their borders, open up them borders, you know, if they're, you know, basically back up their statements there. They're going to have to take it.
But it's also a question of, so listen, I'm very sympathetic to the Palestinians, but it's also I'd be very worried if 1 million Palestinians came to the United States. And not because I dislike Palestinians or Arabs, but it's because like you would think that there would be a trauma that they would bring into whatever country that they brought. Just having gone through what they experienced, just war.
I don't want to completely, you know, misscale this. So I'm going to tread lightly. But when millions of Jews came to the United States during and after the Holocaust, they didn't suddenly, you know, I mean, they brought a shit ton of trauma with them also, but that didn't necessarily negatively impact us.
Most Jewish immigration in the United States took place before the Holocaust.
That's a good point. What about other countries?
And honestly, you could make the case that a lot of the Jews that immigrated to Palestine brought in the trauma of their persecution into the Middle East.
That's also a fair point.
So I believe there's an amount of refugees that a country can take and should take. I don't think you say, okay, let's just take in this entire refugee population. There has to be some type of group effort around the world.
On that, we agree. Let's make all 140 of the countries that recognize Palestine open up their doors to allow those Gazans who do decide to leave and who do so freely. And with the idea that they would be free to return if they so chose, because this would be baked into this.
I don't have this tie to the land type thing. If I was Palestinian from there, maybe it would be different. But when I look at it, I think to myself, like, Lord, get me the fuck out of there. That's how I would look at it. Just, let's help these people escape. Let's help these people escape this horrible, like, just situation, pure malice that's been inflicted on them. And like, how could they live there and just feel comfortable living next to the Israeli state that could just destroy them gleefully at any time?
Right. I mean, I like this one. I think this one's fair. They can leave if they want. And if they do leave, they can come back if they want. But they're encouraged to stick around and play a part in building Gaza back up. I think this is great. Great point. I'm in favor of it. Nothing wrong with it, my opinion. All right. Next one. Hamas and other factions agree not to have any role in the governance of Gaza, indirectly, directly, or in any form. All military, terror, and offensive infrastructure, including tunnels and weapons production facility, will be destroyed and not be rebuilt. There will be a process of demilitarization of Gaza under the supervision of independent monitors, which will include placing weapons permanently beyond use through an agreed process of decommissioning and supported by an internationally funded buyback and reintegration program, all verified by the independent monitors. New Gaza will be fully committed to building a prosperous economy and to peaceful coexistence with their neighbors. Okay, this is another one where it's like, face of it sounds fine, and I'm in favor of it, but like details are important. It says Hamas and other factions. Like, what are these other factions that we're intentionally not naming here? That's important because I could see this as being like an endless loophole to just, anytime Israel just doesn't want a particular faction of the Palestinians to take any kind of power inside of Gaza, they could just protest and say that these are the other factions that we said that would not be able to participate in the governance of Gaza. That's one. And then two, again, I want to point out that Hamas is a political entity. A lot of us like to just specifically think about the militarized wing of Hamas, the ones that perpetrated October 7th, but it is an entire infrastructure, right? Everything from your top level executive leadership all the way down to the trash collectors, right? So are we saying that thousands of civil servants that just happen to be a part of the Hamas infrastructure, like we're talking about aid workers, fucking doctors, accountants and shit, like people that could be useful in a government in the future that probably weren't, in any way a terrorist in not at least in the traditional sense, here, that they wouldn't be able to provide a role or their skill set to the new governance of Gaza. I think this is too loosely written.
Yeah, I agree. We're at 12:06 at night, so let's try to get through the next couple of ones quickly.
Okay. All right, let's speed run this one. So a guarantee will be provided by regional partners to ensure that Hamas and its factions comply with their obligations, that New Gaza poses no threat to its neighbors or people. I mean, again, I want to know who's providing, assurances to the people of Gaza that, Israel isn't going to, invade them at any point. United States will work with Arab and international partners to develop the Temporary International Stabilization Force, ISF, to immediately deploy in Gaza. The ISF will train and support vetted Palestinian police forces in Gaza and will consult with Jordan and Egypt, who have extensive experience in the field. Blah, blah, blah. The ISF will work with Israel and Egypt to secure borders and newly trained Palestinian police forces. Let's see. It's critical to prevent munitions from entering Gaza and facilitate the rapid and secure flow of goods to rebuild and revitalize Gaza. A deconfliction mechanism will be agreed upon by the parties. Okay, this one, I want to be against it in certain ways, but generally speaking, I think like a third-party international force that absolutely needs to be in Gaza to ensure security, to train up new, Palestinian police forces. So I don't think this is avoidable. I don't think there's a reasonable doubt that there needs to be a third-party military force that goes in there and make sure this shit doesn't blow up. I just agree with it. This is a big one. That, again, I don't think that this is going to fly. Israel will not occupy or annex Gaza. Full stop. The ISF establishes control and stability. The IDF will withdraw based on standards, milestones, and timeframes. I'm just going to skip a little bit of this. The IDF will withdraw based on standards, milestones, and timeframes linked to demilitarization that will be agreed upon between the IDF, the ISF, the guarantors, and the United States, with the objective of a secure Gaza that will no longer pose a threat to Israel, Egypt, or its citizens. Practically, the IDF will progressively hand over the Gaza territory it occupies to the ISF according to an agreement that they will make transitional authority until they are withdrawn completely from Gaza, save for, okay, this is an important part, save for a security perimeter presence that will remain until Gaza is properly secure from any resurgent terror threat. What this is basically saying is Israel can't annex Gaza. That already, full stop, I think, for some of the settler hard right community that's going to be hard for them to swallow. They believe that they ought to just take it. And then the ISF, so this international military force, is going to take over for the Israeli Defense Forces in a progressive or phased approach. So what they're saying is eventually, little by little, milestone by milestone, they'll take over. And only when, Palestine is not a threat to Israel or Egypt or its neighbors, but really just Israel, then they'll start withdrawing in a meaningful way. But there's going to be a security perimeter that will remain until Gaza is ready, until Israel says so, basically. So this part is a little bit loose. Don't really know what the proposal is. Don't really know where that line is drawn. And I also don't really know how do we guarantee that this doesn't become like a occupied West Bank situation where, little by little, the Gaza strip is carved up for security reasons. That sounds just like the setup for the West Bank to me, to be honest. Okay. We're almost done here. 4 more to go. In the event Hamas delays or rejects this proposal, the above, including the scaled-up aid operation, will proceed in the terror-free areas handed over from the IDF to the ISF. Okay, it's really funny that they're just calling it terror-free area. So they're saying even if Hamas says no to this, aid operations are still going to happen, but in areas that are currently, I guess, controlled by the IDF, that eventually the ISF will take over. This is the one that I told you to pin, Henry. So if you want to recall your thoughts on this one, an interfaith dialogue process will be established based on the values of tolerance and peaceful coexistence to try and change the mindset and narratives of Palestinians and Israelis by emphasizing the benefits that can be derived from peace.
Yeah, sounds real likely.
I mean, I want this to be the case. I just want this to be really, really clear. I am so in favor of this point, but how? How the fuck are you going to convince? Because honestly, I've seen the most ugly shit on both sides of this argument. I've seen, the way that Hamas was teaching their children about how to hate Jews. And I've literally seen the same thing from Israelis teaching their kids to hate Palestinians. I've literally seen this. I've seen this on both sides, and both parties desperately need to have a, come into Jesus movement. They need to sit down and have a heart, for sure.
Exactly. You said it. Both sides need to just convert to Christianity.
No, that's not what I meant. It was a figure of speech. But you know what I mean, though? It's they need to talk. We have to have that dialogue. How that will happen and whether or not it'll be effective, I don't fucking know. But
dude, man, there's liberals in Israel who've been trying to do that. It's not, just look at who's in parliament, who's in the Knesset.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think these people are interested in having an interfaith dialogue with the Palestinians? No. Come on, it's a joke.
Yeah. Do you think that?
I'm not even talking about the extreme ones. I'm talking about just the moderate ones.
And I imagine there's a shit ton of Palestinians I imagine there's a shit ton of Gazans who are just not interested in having that same conversation with the Israelis either. So
I saw this documentary on DW, the German news outlet.
Mm-hmm.
It was years ago. It was probably 2018. And there was this lady, there's this liberal Israeli lady. She ran a school for that both Arabs and Jews could go to. And the purpose of the school was to get these kids socialized with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And she basically was crying at the end of the interview. She was like, no matter what I do and no matter how good of friends these kids are, understanding these kids, there's just no chance that they're going to be friends when they're older. It's just, she was crying that this, it's things will tear these kids apart as soon as they're out of school. And it was just there not as many as there were, but there were liberal Israelis who were interested in having this dialogue. And it's just the country as a whole is changing. Has changed a lot in the past 30 years. It's becoming much more, again, the way the inheritors of the Israeli state are not like the original Zionist. It's what they're commonly called is the which I'm not even sure that's the correct term for them, but that's what they're commonly called, the ultra-Orthodox. Mm-hmm. It's the country itself is being inherited by zealots. The old school kind of socialist, liberal Zionists, the founders of the country, demographic is disappearing. Mm-hmm. There's really not, I don't see this happening, any type of meeting. Because listen, Yitzhak Rabin was essentially trying to do something like this, and he was killed.
Yep.
He was killed by.
Also, not to completely politicize this, but Bibi Netanyahu was out, in that protest where they were carrying a coffin with Yitzhak Rabin's name on it just weeks before he was assassinated. So, and that's the guy who's running the country
they were
right now.
Carrying,
so.
they were like they had like a mannequin with a Nazi uniform, and they put his face on it. Like, just,
yeah.
There's no, at least in like the foreseeable future, who knows what can happen down the line, what can happen in the distant future, but it doesn't seem there's much chance for any type of dialogue.
All right. We got two more, and I think we can just peace out. This one's interesting. While Gaza redevelopment advances, and when the PA reform program is faithfully carried out, the conditions may finally be in place for a credible pathway to Palestinian self-determination and statehood, which we recognize as the aspiration of the Palestinian people. That's actually pretty crazy. That's big, because it's putting to paper that, as long as certain conditions apply, that Palestinians would have a credible pathway to Palestinian self-determination and statehood. Why is this important? I think it's important because literally in English language media, when Benjamin Netanyahu talks about this proposal, he's in favor of it. He's like, yes, we think it's a great plan. Trump, you're doing a great job. Let me brush off my knees, kissing your ass the whole time, right? And so he's outwardly in English favorable to this. But what I read and what I saw, and I don't speak Hebrew, so I have to rely on the internet to help me decode it. But in social media comments that he made to his Israeli audience in Hebrew, literally said, like, there's no way we're going to allow a Palestinian state. Like, no way. That's not going to happen.
Yeah, dude, that would be politically impossible.
Right. But like, he's saying, he's literally, this is the text of the plan. He's saying, I agree with it. We are in support of it. Let's do it. And on the other side, on the Hebrew side, he's like, there's no way we're going to have a Palestinian state.
Yeah, dude.
And he might not be like contradicting himself, because in this case, it's saying, that there are conditions set to the Palestinian statehood question. That like Palestinians don't deserve a state as a right, but that they can earn it as through specific conditions. Which honestly, these aren't very specific at all. They're pretty broad. They're pretty nebulous.
Yeah.
And why?
Right,
and why this is just last note on this one, and then we can wrap up. I promise. Why this is important is because 140 or so countries have already recognized the state of Palestine. But none of that shit matters if, one, the United States doesn't recognize them, and two, importantly, Israel doesn't recognize them. So this is important because if Israel agrees to this peace plan, they're tacitly agreeing to the idea of a Palestinian statehood, of course, with a big old asterisk on it. But the idea is that this is more meaningful in one way. You can think of it as more meaningful in one way than all 140 of those countries, recognizing the Palestinian state, because the United States and Israel are the only two countries that really matter when it comes to, the Palestinian state forming. On the other hand, you could also read this as incredibly bad faith, right? It is very nebulous, right? There are no specifics on these conditions, and just the idea that a Palestinian state is predicated on some conditions is and can be interpreted as offensive. Like they deserve their own state, full stop, unconditionally. But in this case, they're saying only when you meet these requirements can you have a state. And I get it, right? Like practically speaking, why would Israel allow for the establishment of a Palestinian state without conditions? But, I'm just bringing up both of these sides of the argument to point out that I'm pretty sure that this isn't going to happen. Last point, the United States will establish a dialogue between Israel and the Palestinians to agree on a political horizon for peaceful and prosperous coexistence, which just fucking words, means nothing.
Yeah, that's just
it means
word salad.
Nothing. So
okay.
give me your over under to bring this home. What Do you think that this is going to pass? Do you think that they're going to agree to this? And if
No.
they agree to this, do you think it's going to work?
No.
Well, we agree on that.
I think this was really just an attempt to say, hey, we tried. And then
You know what I would do if I was
Netanyahu can
Hamas?
say,
If I was Hamas, I would agree to this. I know it's like, political suicide for them, but I would agree to this because, in the next couple of months, Israel's just going to fucking bomb the shit out of them, and most of them are going to die anyway, right? And more Palestinians are going to die anyway. So they might as well just agree to it because the Israelis won't agree to it. So at least then they can get the brownie points in the world stage to say, yeah, we agree to Trump's plan.
yeah, that's true. They should just agree with it.
They should just say yes. And I give the same advice to the Israelis. Israelis, I know that you think that there's things that are on here that are unacceptable to you. I think you should just agree to it anyway, because the likelihood that Hamas actually says yes is very, very fucking low, right? So this way you can get your brownie points on the world stage and say, hey, we agreed to the 20-point plan and they didn't say yes. So, they don't want peace. So I'm tricking both of these parties in this case. Both of y'all should say yes. Give it a shot. See what happens.
Yeah, that'd be great. But unfortunately, I don't think that this is a no to both, that they would agree, and no to, or maybe they both agree and it just never happens.
It doesn't actually happen. Yeah.
That's another likelihood. So it's sad. It's so sad that the two conflicts that we're looking at in the world are both just, there doesn't seem that they're Gaza and Russia, Ukraine, they don't seem like they'll ever stop. They're perpetual. But one day they will. And they'll stop when they stop. It's sad.
We only hope for it to stop sooner than later. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Let's wrap this up. Thanks everyone for listening to another episode of Bro History. This was a segment from the Bro History podcast, which you can find on our Substack. Give it a listen on your podcast app. Again, go to Bro History Substack to get the full recording session with no ads, early access. Danny, anything else you want to add?
Nope.
Okay. Peace, guys.
Peace.